Hey everybody, this is Coach Coventry, introducing another OHSF All-Decade team member. We're going to add him to the list of offensive linemen. As always, I let them do their own introduction, so take it away.
Hey there guys, this is Graydon Campbell. I went to St. Mark High School between the years, well, not counting grade 7 and 8, between the years of 2010, 2013. I was an offensive lineman there. I was recognized by the team as the most outstanding offensive lineman my last year when I was playing there. But kind of what led me into football at St. Mark to start, I honestly didn't play until my grade 9 year. And then I went to high school, and it was honestly my mom's suggestion because she was like, you know, you play other sports. I played hockey. I played soccer for a while. I wouldn't call myself the most athletic kid when I first started, when I was younger, but I played sports. And then just kind of grade 9 year, my mom was like, hey, you're a bigger kid, and, I was starting high school, and I figured it was a good way to, make some friends and kind of get to know a bunch of people and stuff like that. So I went out, and to be fair, I was god awful, but I hadn't played before. I honestly went out thinking I might end up being a D lineman. And then Coach Castellarin was basically like, no, you're an offensive lineman. I was like, okay. I didn't really know much about football to begin with.
So yeah, you came from different backgrounds. Then you were playing what other sports when you were a kid? What was the
it was background? Hockey mainly. We've been a hockey family. My older brother actually had a bit of a pro career there. So he definitely took hockey the farthest. But basically my parents were like, you're gonna play a sport every season. So it was hockey, soccer, whatever it was. Yeah. But then I don't know. Mom pushed me to football, and I was like, yeah, I think I watched all the Friday Night Lights, and I remember the Titans, and I was like, yeah, I want to be a high school football player.
I think you'll thank your parents, even now, just thinking like, hey, that was, good of you to put me in a sport in every season. Because I found even myself growing up, just playing sport to sport, it makes you a better athlete in that one sport you love in the end, right?
100%. Honestly, I mean, maybe that might be my one. I know you're saying we will talk about advice, but I'm going to say that, just segue that right now real quick. Because I think that was the one thing that I did in high school my last few years. When I focused on the recruiting process, I started really focusing towards football, and I kind of I stopped playing hockey. I was playing rugby. So I think maybe when I think about it now, it's like, I wish I kind of even picked up more sports and kind of really explored that a bit more too, when I discovered I was actually an athletic person.
Hey, well, it sounds like you figured it out anyway. And, that's a great segue into moving into the high school scene. You talked about Coach Castellarin, and you talked about your getting in a little bit to your grade 9 year. Let's talk about that grade 9 year in your first year. How'd the team do? How did you do? Coach Castellarin's influence, and perhaps the other coaches like Coach Brown or anybody like that.
I think that was my JV. That was JV. So I still hadn't necessarily made it up with Coach Brown and Coach Castellarin, and they knew who I was, and they were excited for when I got up there. But we kind of separated, like the grade 9s and 10s, stuck with the JV mostly, and because some of it was, we were St. Mark was known for having some of these big boys, and part of that is you let them grow. So I was working with Coach Dobson at that time when I first got out there, and he was a big influence because I had him as a science teacher too, and I'm obviously good friends with his son as well. We played together, and we played against each other in college as well. But, he was definitely, the first kind of coach I really looked up to and enjoyed. I enjoyed playing football with him. And my grade 9 year, I mean, I definitely struggled a lot. I was a learning curve and a half to figure out how to play offensive line. Part of it was also, to have that kind of mean streak. And I don't think I really came into that until maybe sophomore, junior year, where I started to figure out, kind of like, actually getting after some kids.
Yeah.
It was definitely a good year for me, just in terms of, getting used to football and kind of some of the ways that everything went down. And just because it was so different compared to the way even though I'd been playing other sports, just football, it's a contact sport. I hadn't really done contact sports at that point.
It's a real collision sport if you look at it, right? You're always hitting something or doing something contact-wise, shoulder, hands,
Especially as an offensive lineman. Like before that, I basically had never hit a person in my life, and now here we are, and it's like every single day you're hitting like multiple times. So But it was a lot of fun that first year. I know my dad jokes he would have he would have played someone else to keep me from getting hit so much. But you know, I'm glad I got pushed into doing that, or just advised into doing that, and I'm glad I stuck with it despite probably some of the days where I was like, God, I'm awful at this.
Oh yeah, I remember the first day I had Coach Bean at St. Pete's, and just a quick little story here. I remember jumping on the field in my first grade 9, and I got hit by an older guy, and I came off pretty much crying, and then just he turned around and looked at me, and he's like, "So what? It's a Bobo." You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And it's just like you. Some days you think, "Oh man, I want to quit." And then other days you're just like, you know what? This is a sport for me, for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, I'm thinking now I'm reminiscing about it because I'm remembering like one of these games. It was like sleeting, like snowing at the time. I'm like, were you really gonna play in this? And I'm wearing like we got St. Mark, the JV jerseys are like this bright red. Yeah. But I don't have like a compression shirt or anything because like I have no idea. I don't even have like actual football gloves. I'm wearing like this Boise State shirt that my uncle gave me that's like bright orange under it, and like these mittens to play. And it's like, what am I like? It was thinking back, I'm like, God, what was I doing? But it was so I was like,
you come a long way though, but that's those grade 9 JV years. You learn nobody's good there first year. It's very rare you come polished. You come with some people come with different levels, and you usually catch up by the end of the year once you've got those fundamentals. But yeah, moving on from there, talk to me about the varsity years, and after you've got that 1 year under your belt, what's that grade 10 year looking like, and how's the team doing?
That grade 10 year was kind of my turning point where I kind of made the decision that I wanted to play college football, and I still have no idea what I'm talking about. I just remember I was like, I think I saw Michigan State on the TV. I'm like, that would be so cool to do that. So I'd already in some way like made up my mind at that point, like that I wanted to play like Division I football. Mm-hmm. But the thing that made that was I remember that year, because of numbers, basically there was no like JV and varsity training camp. It was just one big group of guys. And I actually ended up being, I think, the starting guard through that preseason. And so that was kind of like the big thing for me, because here I am, like this kind of grade 10 kid, I think I was like maybe 240 at the time, maybe that's probably even exaggerating. And
240 in grade 10 though. Yeah.
I remember that year, I think like Chris Fanning was still on the team. He was just like this enormous. He was like a victory lap guy too. So he was just big, strong. Like, and there are all these guys that we had there who were like 5th year guys. Yeah. And so it was just kind of like awesome for me to get to have that chance to play amongst those guys and be considered with that. So through the preseason, I played that. I ended up playing JV because I think the JV coach at that time was Mike Ireland. And he was like, I want him because obviously, like, I don't want the JV team to also struggle. And he's technically one of my guys. But like, it was really big to play that preseason and to have that year. And that was just another year of growing, but also seeing like that maybe I actually can be a football player after all. And then I made my decision where it's like I want to play Division I. And at the end of that year, I remember sitting down with Costello, and then he introduced me to Scott Mitchell. And it was like, here's our guy who went on, played at Rice, played with the Eskimos. And so that year, that offseason was the first time I actually really like trained and worked in the offseason, because I would go work with Scott Mitchell, and he actually was coaching me how to be a better offensive lineman and stuff.
I was gonna say, what a connection, man! Like like it's nice to see that these coaches are linking you guys to guys that have gone through the system. It's super important to kind of have those alumni relations, and it taught you exactly as you said how to get better and how to be better.
Yeah, I mean, I without I think Coach Costello really opened the door there to meet Scott, and then with Scott, I ended up meeting Victor Todondo, who I'm sure other guys have mentioned and you've heard of, who helped me in the off season as well. Yeah. And so like, it was just kind of like just step by step, making it up the ladder and getting to meet these new people and getting all this different type of coaching. And so grade 10 was definitely this big year where it's like still trying to figure out how to play football and like be a really good football player, but at the same time also, meeting all these guys who have been through it and really know a lot of, have a lot of experience. And like, so that was a big year going and helping me go to get to grade 11 and kind of start making a run at getting some interest down south of the border as well.
That's good. And then, obviously, was the JV team had any success that year? Were you guys able to hit a championship or?
I don't know. Honestly, the funny thing with me is, and I don't really recall a lot of like the scores and wins or losses in that game. Like, for me back then, it was fun to go out there with friends and like in my teammates and stuff and just play the games and and just enjoy the game and really get to learn it and pick it up.
I think I was the same as you. My junior years, I don't really remember too much about what the scores were and stuff. But yeah, playing football at that age was really fun, and it kind of seals that love for you when you get into those senior ranks and it gets a little more serious. And that's good. Again, we can segue to grade 11. So talk to me about that senior years, those senior years.
So yeah, grade 11 was the big year for me. Just in terms of like, I'm coming out here now. Like, I've decided I want to play college football down in the States. And I'm feeling good about myself because I went through this whole offseason with Scott and working out with Victor, and I'm stronger, bigger. I'm at like 250, 260 now. So I feel good about it. I'm like I'm feeling great about all this stuff. And coming into that, I think I did a few camps in the States over the summer as well. And so like, I'm sitting there like really feeling myself about this. And so that was a fun year. Because there was just a lot of guys on the team that year as well. Like, there was Noah Demang and like, Liam Dobson was on the team at that point too. Mm-hmm. And like, just all these guys who, I, for years now, have like worked out with, and like, you just keep coming back and like, ending up like talking to all these guys. And so that was just a lot of fun that year. And that was a really good year for me, because I think that was like the first year where I really like felt like myself. I was like, wow, I'm actually like I'm a good player at this point. Like, I know what I'm doing. And it's funny because I sit there now and I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like, what was I doing on that play? Like, what am I doing? And then I see some of the pictures. I'm like, what am I like, so it's like, It's funny how like you feel so good then, just you grow up and you're like, wow, there's so much more that I was going to learn and become and get better at. Mm-hmm. But that was a lot of fun that year. I was primarily, I think, a left tackle. Played a few games at center. And then I played on defense here and there. And I remember I think there was like a few games versus Santa Fe and stuff where like, I don't think I came off the field because there was offensive liners playing D-line, and then I ended up being on like multiple special teams. I tried to get on the kickoff cover unit and they didn't let me, but
what was the excuse on that one? Was it to give you a break, or was it you were too slow?
I think they're like, we want to put some skill guys on it. It's like, okay, but I think in practice I'd still go in there, like I'd run down the field just to be like, look, I could do it. But
I think the consensus is, at least with my team, is if you're athletic enough, you're going to play on the specials. I never really was one of those guys to kind of take away from O-linemen running down the field. I mean, in high school, darn right, like you said, you didn't even come off the field sometimes. So the reality is, if you're one of the better athletes on the field, why are we taking you off? You need to play. Yeah.
I mean, even in college, like once I got to college, I finally started getting onto the special teams, and like that, like I was on like field goal block, punt, like those were fun. Like those were fun plays, and like they're collision, and you're getting at like you got a guy running like about to like try to break your head off. But man, like special teams was a lot more fun. And at that time, I think it was like, I'm an O-lineman. Like I don't want to like do special teams, but I also like being on special teams. So it was a weird thing. But yeah, grade 11 was a really, really awesome year for me. I started getting, recruited by the Canadian schools. I remember meeting like Queens and Ottawa U after some of the games. And like, so that was a lot of fun. And then transitioning to that, after a lot of conversations and stuff, I ended up actually transferring to finish out my high school career at a school in Northern Virginia. And so that's where I finished my years. And I mean, don't have to talk about that too much because that's not really the point right now. But like, that was just another step in kind of growing and developing to get further on.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, it's definitely something that was mentioned even by Liam, when he transferred over as well. It is an important step, coming from Ottawa High School, doing your years there, and then developing into the player you are and moving up, definitely helps you getting there. And for you, we can segue that into a grade 12, recruiting year type thing. Talk to me about how that went down for you and what your mentality was like, going through that senior year, that grade 12 year, trying to get yourself that D1 scholarship. What were you leaning to, and what were your focuses on, basically?
Yeah, that year I mean, I've been focusing on recruiting basically from the moment that I got connected with, that I talked to Costello and was like, I want to play in the NCAA, and he connected me with Scott Mitchell and stuff, and Victor, and so like that's kind of where I started thinking about my recruiting. But yeah, obviously that summer right before your senior year is kind of a big year for getting recruited. My mindset basically was I gotta, I think now that it's been established there are Canadian guys and guys in Ottawa specifically who can really ball and like play at this level. It's not as necessary, I think, to transfer down to the States to help your exposure because these coaches now look up here. But back then, that was like a big deal, kind of big stepping stone for me because it was one of those things that was just going to help me refine myself and just put myself in front of all of these, just in the mix of where these coaches are going to be looking. And so that I honestly, I came, all my experience with St. Mark and everything with Costello and with Coach Brown, with Coach Ireland as well, because he was a the JV coach, but he also helped with the D-line with varsity, and he was, kind of a close friend who I like worked out with a bit and trained with a lot as well. And all those guys, they just shaped into this kind of mentality of like, you got to go down there and like you can't be just. It can't be like you're just some Canadian kid just trying to get by. Like you got to be the guy. Yeah. And so that was what kind of building all of that. I went down there, and the coaches there obviously helped me out a ton too with some more specifics and kind of understanding because the game changes too. It becomes American football, not like so you have different rules, more downs, stuff like that. But no, I went down there and just the whole mindset was I gotta work hard and everything. I gotta just. There's no excuse and there's no reason, I can't just be like, oh, well, I'm doing well against Americans. So like, and I'm the Canadian guy. Like that wasn't it. It's like, I want to be the best, not because I'm Canadian, just because.
Yeah. And, the way that, let's be honest, the way that NCAA coaches look at it, just population wise, you're one Canadian and they have 10 of you technically, exactly. And it's not to take away from your skill. It's the reality of the populace and the population. Yeah. Where for every one really good Graydon, there's probably 5 or 6 guys that are just as good and maybe perhaps better. And so you have to come in and show that you are better than those guys. So they go, you know what? We don't have to take an American guy. We want the Canadian guy.
Well, especially when all the American guys are well fed, because that was the other battle for me was I was undersized. I was getting told, you're like 6'2", you got short arms, you're only like 260, like 270. Maybe 270 on a good day.
Oh, geez.
So you're battling, especially as an interior lineman, because they're looking at guards and centers, and it's like centers can get away with that a little bit more, but I was a bit more of a guard. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, you're not beefy like that. But I mean, what won out for me was being a really good athlete. Like the thing I loved the most was pulling. I was so excited every time the play would come in. It's like, oh, you got to pull. I was like, I am so ready for this.
Linebacker's worst nightmare.
Yeah. It was so much fun. But yeah, no, those years in America was just kind of like getting used to the fact that it's like, yeah, they have 10 other guys. Why would they take you? But it's like, but now you're here in the thick of it against these 10 other guys. So you get to directly show like, yeah, but this is why you take me,
Yeah, for sure. And not just talent-wise, what was your experience with like the NCAA clearinghouse and having to get your academics together? Like if you can speak to a Canadian student athlete who's trying to get to the NCAA, what could you talk about in terms of getting into an American school academics-wise?
Well, especially the schools that I got recruited by, because there was a lot of like it was Ivy League and some of these more the public, Ivy kind of universities. You got to have a handle on your academics. You got to be, you got to kind of be like a BA type student. Like, and that honestly, I find, especially as a high schooler, is more about you're there and you do the work. It's not, you don't have to be some genius to do that. You just have to be some guy who works really hard and cares a lot about it and puts in the time. With the clearinghouse, that's honestly, I don't remember that as well. I was in a good place because I had always been someone who like wanted to be a good student. Like I valued that a lot. So I just went through it and it was fine. The one thing that you have to prepare for and you have to think about, because we don't do it in Canada outside of the literacy test, is like their standardized tests. Yeah. And you have the SAT and the ACT. And most schools like the SAT, they mostly take both. I remember I took both of those tests twice to get the scores I wanted, because like some schools will be like, and it all depends on like how they see you versus how they see you talent wise and academic wise. So if you're a really uber talented guy who's not as good academically, they might still take you, because then they're going to go find like another guy who they can work on as an athlete, but also have really good grades. And so it paid for me to be kind of one of those guys where it's like, I'm a good player, but I also have these good academics. So it's not like a worry, but yeah, those tests are important. Now, honestly, I got through on the ACT. The nice thing about the ACT, the secret about the ACT is they don't take points off for wrong answers. So you just answer everything on the test. And but I think they do have science on the ACT though. So that's the one thing, they do have an extra section. Whereas the SAT is one of those strategic things where it's like, you want to get right answers, but if you get wrong answers, they take off like, I think, a quarter of a point.
Okay.
So
that's new information. Definitely some of the other guys hadn't mentioned that before. So that'll be a good tidbit of information for any student athlete looking to take SAT versus ACT.
Yeah. I think the best way is just to take both and see how depending on what school you're looking at, if that's what, I think Canada is obviously a very different landscape. Yeah. But like if you're looking at the States, and I think taking both would be a smart choice, because you kind of, depending on the school or what your score is, you can pick which one you want to give them. Because it was the ACT, I had Ivy Leagues looking at me, and it was the ACT that kind of got me to, where they're like, yeah, we can accept you. Yeah. Whereas, but yeah, so.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I mean, that adds some value to, like I said, kids thinking of going that route. But going back to football wise, was your heart always set on being at William and Mary, or when you were taking your visits, was it kind of open, football in terms of the recruiting process, it kind of takes you different ways in that senior year. And you've some people, have their mindset on a certain school, but others, just kind of keep an open mind frame. Where was your mindset at?
I could say, okay, yeah. If basically there's a way to sum up me as a high school football player when I'm just thinking about something, it would be kind of like just one of those things where it's ignorance is bliss type deal, where it's like, I didn't know what I didn't know in some way. So when I was getting recruited by all these schools, it's like, I wasn't really like picky about where it was going to be. I obviously, like, I wanted to take the visits and get to know, and I was one of those ones where it's like, it's got to be the right fit for me. But it wasn't like this has been like the school I've followed my whole life, or this is the one that I have to go to, because it was like, why limit myself to that, especially if it looks nice on paper and then you get there and it's like, this is terrible, because I wanted to make the decision once. I wanted to say, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm committing, this is who I'm working with for my career, kind of thing. So it was wide open for me, because honestly, I didn't know, some of the schools I got recruited by, I hadn't heard of before, because I was, William and Mary, I did not know about until they kind of started following me. And then I started doing research on them. And, then I was like, wow, like this is a really cool place. But I mean, it was wide open. I looked at Harvard, I went to Yale, Princeton was up there, even in my own conference, there was Elon. They were my first offer. And that was kind of where I thought I might go for the longest time, because it was like, they're my first offer. They're the first people to really take a shot on me. Yeah. And I felt good about them and their coaching staff and stuff like that. There's JMU as well. Like, I had a very wide kind of open net of places I could have gone. And it just kind of came down to, I wanted to go to a place that would be competitive football wise, have really good academics, and more than that, like have a reputation where it's, if I come back to Canada and I'm looking for jobs and my future in Canada, that degree, that piece of paper I have isn't going to be like, well, where the heck is this place? Or it would be a school. They'd be like, oh, like, yeah, I've heard of that before. Yeah. Like, not some random, so
Indiana University, Purdue University of Miners Tech, exactly, I'm just making it up as we go along, but they got schools like that, like they just kind of exist in university towns, and that's all they are. Yeah.
And then I remember I went to William and Mary on my visit, and at that point, I think I was down to Princeton and William and Mary, because my brother was also getting recruited to play hockey there. And so we're like, that would be cool to have us both there. And then William & Mary was, this really good academic school. It felt a lot like where I wanted to be because I just come from EHS, which was the high school I was at in Virginia, and it felt a lot like that. I really liked being there. I liked the coaching staff. I had, the guy recruiting me was Winston October, who was a big return man in the CFL, and that was a cool connection to have. And so there's just a lot of things, and at the end of it, I just was like, I can't really beat getting a full scholarship to go to a school like William & Mary. So I sat down and I just called my parents. I was like, yeah, this is where I'm going to go. And that was a done deal. I mean, it had kind of everything I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. And just, from there, that's, obviously big, getting that full ride and whatnot. But, kids want to know, like, what's it like on campus at an American university? And, what was your feel like coming in, as a young, fresh-faced 18-year-old Canadian, coming in for year one to compete with some of these American guys? Where were you kind of suited up, and what was your mentality going into that?
That freshman year was interesting because that's probably the most offensive lineman we've ever had on the team. Like, there have been years where it's like we got 6 guys, and it's like, God, how are we going to get through a season or a spring?
Oh,
but that year we had like 4. Like, we'd recruited 4 freshmen, including me, and then we had 3 sets of full lines basically. So we had like all of the senior guys, and we had their back. And so that training camp, actually, I was basically a practice dummy. Me and the 3 other guys, freshmen and linemen, we basically didn't do a lot because like our O-line coach was like, I'll work with you a little bit, but at the same time, like, I'm really never going to play you this year. We have so many bodies right now. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, that was an interesting thing because at that point you have to, in your own head, be like, okay, I got to stay kind of locked in and, prepare myself because, I was one of those guys where it's just kind of like, you never know like what's going to happen. Watch 15 guys go down and here I am ready to play, So it was one of those things that was like, I wanted to all be ready. Even though there was 0 chance, and there was, we won, I didn't really do anything that year on the field. I was a practice guy and I worked, the big thing is as, a young guy who's working his way, he's a scout team guy. It's about, part of it's about giving the look that you need to give for the seniors and the older guys to be ready for their game. And then it's just also about like, you got to just bust your hump because you want to be one of the guys on the other side who's actually preparing for the game. But I don't know. William & Mary was a unique place because it was a very heavily academic school. So my experience as a football player might be different than some of the guys who picked some of these schools where it's like football is like religion to those. And so it's like I was known as a football player. It's kind of obvious. But it's like it wasn't like superstar treatment in that way, which was kind of honestly in some ways like I'm glad because that would have gone right to my head. I did not need that.
Oh, there's definitely some stories I have of some SEC guys with the Owls where you ask them, hey, what'd you do for class? And they kind of look at you like, class? Like,
It's the opposite. It's like, there were guys who, if you had a class, basically, like some guys would be like 20, 30 minutes late to practice because they were in their classes.
Yeah.
So it was a vastly kind of flip compared to what you typically hear about
It sounds very similar to the Canadian system as well, where we had night class, and if we had to go to night class, we were leaving practice, or if we were coming from an afternoon class, we would just jump into practice when we could.
Yeah, there was that, and then on Mondays, I think basically like if you want to take a lab or any of these like annoying classes, like you're taking it on Monday because we're gonna do practice at like 8 o'clock, and so you have so put those all on that day. I remember that was a big thing too.
Yeah.
So like it was definitely it's one of the schools, and it's a big thing where it's like you're student athletes, and like we want to sell it like this is top tier academics, but also a top tier athletic program. But we're not gonna we don't want to let slide either.
No, that's great, and I think you realized that coming in, and clearly that choice was the right thing. And now you ended up spending all 4 of your years there, and perhaps a 5th. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a 5th.
If you were redshirted, you were probably, absolutely in that first year. So those 5 years, you probably looking back, gained a lot more knowledge, not just from the high school days. Like you said, you thought you knew so much, but what's the growth process from high school to university? Like as a, think of yourself as a grade 12 senior, and then, a senior in university type.
Yeah. I like, the best way I can put it is like, there's always a bigger fish. Like I remember coming out of high school and I was like, I'm really, like, I'm good. I'm technically sound. I'm an athletic guy. And I get to college and it's like, okay, but you're also only like 280. And, you got these guys who squat a house who are, just built. And it's like, how are you going to beat that guy? You can't just out athlete everyone. You have to. And so like, that was the big learning curve, was kind of realizing it's like, okay, you were top dog, but now you're not. Now you got to kind of build yourself right back up. And so that was, that I think honestly it's the biggest thing from going from high school to college is you got to kind of be humble and humble yourself and be like, there's always something that you can get better at. Like even now I'm sitting here and I think about my sophomore year when I started playing a bit more in college. I'm like, man, what was that stance? Like, I don't know, because I initially like really lowered my stance to try and get under people, because it's like, okay, I'm a smaller guy. My way of winning is going to be staying under them. And so I would sit so low to the ground. And now I'm saying like, that did nothing for me. there's nothing that stance really on. So it's like, it's even now where I'm sitting there, I look at this, where it's like, even like, you just keep learning. And like, it's about just kind of being an open book and being open to kind of criticism and being told like, look, like, yeah, cool. Like you got recruited and you were a high recruit for us, but at the same time it's like, okay, now you're here and it doesn't matter. Like there was a guy that we had on our team who came in as a walk-on and he rose to be an All-American. And so it's like, there are guys who come on the team and they're highly recruited and you think they're gonna be great and they kind of just stay even, and then you have guys who completely go above and beyond what they were expected to do. So
I think the way I look at it, at least for yourself, it seems very similar to kind of my own pathway. It's we're good athletes, but we weren't great athletes, so we worked harder. You know what I mean? And it's the idea of consistently having that work ethic to get past those guys who would have been the 5-star recruits, or the guys that they were highly recruited type guys.
Now the funny thing is actually. It's when I first found out like I was being honored as all-decade O-line for high school. It's just kind of funny because coming out the last 3 years, I was a defensive lineman, and so I've been in I went to the dark side. I've been in that defensive mentality now because we had a lot of injuries on our defensive line one year, and they're like, we're gonna pull an offensive lineman over there just to be a body, and that just transitioned into me getting to actually play defensive line for the rest of my college career, which. Again, like here we are, hit the reset button, learning. Again. Now I'm picking up a new position. But it's funny. I mean, it's just funny to think about kind of how things, because I remember starting out football, and as I said, I was like, I thought I was going to be a D lineman. I started as an O lineman, and I love O line, and I've loved O line. But then when I got to college, there's just something like, I loved O lineman as in high school, basically. That was a ton of fun for me. But then when I got to college, D-line became really fun. And I mean, obviously biased because that's what I've done for the last little while now. But like, it was just one of these things that was just, it was just a really fun position to like transition into playing. So,
and like you said, I think that goes with the idea that you were a well-rounded athlete. Growing up, you probably had a skill set that one allowed you to play O-line, but then also was like, well, if you need me to change positions, I can actually do that because I'm athletic enough to kind of get by on that.
And exactly. And then that opened the door to special teams too, because they're like, okay, now he's a D lineman. Now we can call him an athlete. Like back when I was no lineman, it's like they threw gritted teeth. They're like, you're athletic.
Oh, we know all about university and O linemen. They do not do special teams. I think at Bishop's we had one guy, and he just happened to be a long snapper, so we had to. That's
the only thing. You have the long snapper sometimes. And then it's the field goal unit. It's like, God forbid, because I was a short guy, so they're never going to put me at the tackle or tight end spot on field goal. It's like, do not put me in that guard where they line up 3 300-pound guys to just absolutely annihilate my existence.
But also going forward, I mean, if you look at the Canadian game and maybe making that transition back to the CFL, how important is special teams, for a guy like you, not just playing on defense, but, learning to play a special teams, it becomes something that's even more valuable.
Oh, it's one of those things where it's just like the more stuff you can do. And that was always a lesson. I remember the first time I heard that was back with my JV coach, Coach Ireland, when he's like, if you want to play at the next level, every time you go to the next, you have to have more than one skill. You can't just rely on the fact that, oh, I'm a good even as an offensive lineman, he was like, pick up special teams, learn to long snap, learn. And it's like, yeah, college, they barely put offensive linemen on special teams, but sometimes they do. You look at, I don't know about Canadian, but in American, there's a lot of punt units that do the shield formation.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to find out how many offensive linemen they stick on that. But any way you can offer extra value to the team. Don't sell yourself like, oh, if I'm a tackle, don't just be like, oh, I'm a good left tackle. That's what's going to, know guard, know how to snap a ball, like do whatever it takes. And it's like, don't rest on the laurels of like, I'm a senior or an older guy and I don't need to worry about that stuff because I'm going to be just fine. It's like, yeah, but there's always someone who is worrying about that stuff. There's a guy who might not be as good as you now who's doing that stuff, and then he's going to start catching up.
Yeah, and I guess that's a perfect segue into the idea of student athletes who, want to perhaps follow your pathway and whatnot, or want to follow some advice that you could give them. Maybe add on to what you were just saying about that as advice, or what it is a piece of advice you want to perhaps give a kid before we head off on this pod.
I think for me, because of how my career was, being a guy who played a lot of offense high school, but then transitioned to defense. There's 1 year I played both, and it was basically a week-to-week decision where they're like, yeah, you're going to be an offensive lineman this week. Or like, okay, you're going to defensive line this week. And it's like, it's being kind of, for me, it's be a jack of all trades and be adaptable. So pick up other things, have other skills to offer. And I'm not saying, it's hard to be good at everything. So always find things that you're really, really good at. Emphasize those because you have to have things that are selling points and highlights. And, athletes will know themselves best. If you're, strong, if you're, like my example is like pass rushing. If you're a strong guy, like you're going to be more of a power rusher, but that doesn't mean you take away speed moves or counters because eventually you might have to use one. But overall for me, it's being well-rounded. And that goes back to when I talked about playing multiple sports and like myself, like wishing I might've done more and realized I was a better athlete at the time than I thought I was. It's, you will never be upset for having, being well-rounded and having a lot of skills because it's the best selling point. Because sometimes it's like, okay, like, he's not ready to be an offensive lineman in a game yet, but we can put him on punt. And then, you slowly show that you're good on punt. Like, okay, well, let's give him more responsibility. So the best thing is just to work on everything and also work on things that you're bad at, work on weaknesses. I remember, sometimes it's all you get attention from stuff you do when you're not even at practice, like in the weight room or in conditioning. That's like, be the offensive lineman who can do pull-ups because some of the guys in college even still can't do it without like, resistance bands. So be that guy because it's the little things that get you attention. The little things where it's like, like he's doing that, no one else is. So like, let's try him out. Let's see how he does, So there's probably a ton of advice in that jumbling mess I just said.
No, that was great, man. I think that's a great way to, end the pod. And just wanted to also, before we head off, just say once again, congratulations on making this list. This was no small feat. It took us about a full year of Zoom calls and other things to kind of, with all the other coaches to kind of figure out who was on and who was off and whatnot. And it was, no easy feat to get on this. No. And there was a lot of debate. So, congratulations for that. And, welcome to this OHSF.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's an incredible honor. I was slightly surprised when I saw the email. I was like, but it's awesome. And it was really exciting to find out. So thank you for a ton.
Well, the pleasure is all ours, and we really, and for you, it was just we really enjoyed seeing, and talking about the accolades that you had and the things that you did. And Coach Castellarin was quick to rave about you, so I think it was a pretty easy decision to have you on this list. And based on what you've said and whatnot, I really appreciate the call, and I really appreciate the talk. And congratulations. Like I said, welcome to the list. And this is Graydon Campbell and Coach Coventry signing off for the OHSF All-Decade list. We just added another O-lineman. Take care.
Thank you. You too.